I had to when we were pastoring, when I was pastoring the church, um, I had to quietly, ask someone to kind of sit down, step down, um, because they could not control their viewpoint of a specific theological position. It's like, no, that's controlling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not enough to say that, no, those are secondary issues. You may see things differently than other people see them, but it was ruling them. And they were trying to create an environment that wouldn't promote health, but it was actually causing problems and issues.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And I had to root that out quick. Right? No matter how true it is.
Yeah.
No matter how good it is. Right? And it doesn't matter. It not only matters what you believe, it matters how you believe it. Right? So doctrinal purity is another sign, right? If a community's like, we got the truth, it's not a community that you should be a part of. Number 3 is demanding loyalty and obedience, right? So if a community is demanding loyalty and obedience and submission, this is a high control environment. And by loyalty, if how can I say this? If usually in those type of environments, you cannot dissent or question anything. Okay. You're completely loyal and obedient to what's being said. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no questioning the answers or questioning the questions. It's just submission, right? Do what's said, right? Complete submission. And it's often met with severe consequences, right? Whether it's any type of church discipline or anything like that, but also just shame or outcast, right? There you go, right?
Yeah.
Where you're put in a position where, you're not seen with the community any longer because you're not listening, right?
Yeah.
And then, and so I've been in positions like that, you know what I mean? Or situations like that where it was like, man, like, if you show any type of idea of having your own mind, it doesn't go well. It doesn't go well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's just crazy because you should be, I just said crazy, but you should be able to speak your mind, question things. That's how the mind works. That's how we learn stuff. What did the kids always say? When you say this, it's not why. They're always asking why. Why do you think they're asking why? Why, why is the sky blue? Why is this? Why is there a truck here? Why is there, no, you don't need to know. What if that was just our answer? You don't need to know. You just need to just know it's there. You know what I mean? Or just, just get in the car. You don't need to know how it drives or how we move or whatever, whatever questions, why the light's red or whatever, you know what I mean? It's because they're learning. That's how they learn is by asking why. And, I think that's healthy to be able to be in a community to ask questions and because you want to grow. That's the process of growing. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. And usually in these situations, the things that you're being asked are usually around things that are going to benefit the community or benefit themselves. Right. So, like giving, you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's like, no, like, you need to give. You understand what I'm saying? And yes, you need to do it sacrificially and it doesn't matter. This is what God desires of you. This is what God wants from you. And you know what I mean? And it's like, well, I also have X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you don't question that authority. You see what I'm saying? You don't question that. And so a lot of times it's usually centered around something that's benefiting the community itself. And that's another sign of seeing like, wait a minute. Right? I can't question anything concerning the community.
Yeah.
I have to have loyalty as it relates to the community. You'll hear this a lot, like in, new members classes and different things of that sort, when people are walking through membership and stuff like that, you got to agree to the vision of this church. Well, what does that mean, that I got to agree to the vision of this church? Right. Do I got to believe everything that's entailed in that?
Right.
Can I question this? Or, you know what I mean? That's kind of like one of my issues with membership, right? It pulls people in and pushes people out based on reasons that are excluded outside of scripture, right? You know what I mean? It causes problems like this, right? Well, you signed up.
Right.
You're covenanting with our community. You signed up for this. You know what I mean? This is where God has you. This is where God wants you. So do it. You know what I mean? Like you got to have faith, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's how I feel going back to the W-2.
Lord, you stuck on that W-2, huh?
But that's how I feel. I feel like if you give them your W-2s, then that means you're signing up and you're okay with them coming to you and being like, hey, you made this much money. I didn't see 10%.
Yeah.
I didn't see 10% plus giving.
Yeah.
I didn't, or offering, whatever they, however the breakdown thing is. But, yeah. So if you once you turn that in, you're agreeing to that.
Absolutely. But think about this. Think about somebody who's just coming into the faith, or somebody who does not have that that type of training or understanding, who's just learned this new, maybe they've been in the faith for a while, but they've just learned this new way of expressing their doctrine. They think that this is the right way.
Right.
They think that this is the way things are supposed to be. They think it's normal. Right. And what's unfortunate is we'll talk about this a little bit, but how they get away with stuff like this is that the community's usually isolated you from other folks. You don't fellowship with other Christians. You only fellowship with people who are in your community. So all of those ideas are just reinforced.
Right.
You're not hearing or seeing anything different. Why? Because it's usually doctrinal purity as well. No, we have the right doctrine. Don't listen to that because that's bad teaching. It all coincides with keeping people in line into this area. So think about it from that perspective. Yeah, you're right. Like when you sign up for that, but most people don't know.
Right.
They don't know any better. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, the leaders are the ones who are misusing their authority in order to get people to do these things. Right?
Yeah.
All right. So number 4 is social isolation, right? Or special significance, kind of the opposites of both of those sides. So social isolation is just kind of like what I was talking about. In high control environments, you're not encouraged to fellowship with people outside of your environment, right? And again, like this goes hand in hand with doctrinal purity. We believe this, they believe that. You might not want to, go over there. It's dangerous, and again, so you don't get the fellowship outside of your environment, right? You have community secrets, right? There's things that you keep in-house. Everything's about, no, if you have an issue, you come speak to an elder. You don't speak to anybody else about it. You come to an elder, and they'll use certain scriptures to, Matthew, 18 says that, okay, right? Okay, so you understand, right? So there's a manipulation that socially isolates people from the rest of the community in high control environments, where that community becomes everything, becomes your whole source, isolates you from family, and so you end up being in church 24/7, right? You need to be faithful to, all of these things. You need to come to Bible study. You need to come to prayer night. You need to, right? And so all of that is isolation as well, right?
A good example of that is we've been in that type of situation where 24/7, we're in church 24/7 and, family wants to do things with us, or, friends outside want to do things with us, but we're booked. We're booked because we got all these things that we have to do at the church. You know what I mean? And in that type of environment, church comes first. You're not supposed to have anything else before that. So, if you got something to do for church, you got to go,
Absolutely.
And or there'd be events, certain family events, and only one of us could go or something like that. And it's crazy. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. I was going to go into another story, but I won't. But
sorry.
Anyway, no, it's okay. I think this is really good. All right. So we'll keep going here. All right. So number 5 is high demands, right? So there's a high demand on your membership. So sort of like what we were just talking about, where, the member or the person that's a part of that community is expected to do certain things, whether that's fellowship, finances, personal resources. There's high demands on the believer to participate in every area of community, service. You can only fulfill these commands that God gives to one another within this environment. You know what I mean? Like, everything is aiming around or supporting the community. You understand what I'm saying? Like the church is about supporting the church, means supporting this community, right? So there's high demands, right? And again, this often goes back to like what we're saying with the financial commitment. That's a huge one. You know what I mean? Like, man, like, financial, that's an extreme case of a W-2, but even just with tithing, there's, a lot of teaching on that type stuff, or just giving in general. Doesn't have to be that, those things being related to faithfulness with God, how you do those things, determine your faithfulness with God. But yeah, so there's high demand. That's a big sign of a high control environment, right? So number 6 is fear, guilt, and shame. So in high control environments, you're usually left with fear, guilt, and shame, or you're led by fear, guilt, and shame, right? If you don't participate in this, there's a sense of fear, or you're shamed for it, or if you don't believe these things, you're, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or like if you doubt, or if you have questions, right? There's this fear, guilt, and shame that comes along with that, right? And the environment uses that to push people forward, right? Or to push people deeper into commitments that they want you to be a part of, right? Yeah. I remember, I don't know. No, we weren't. So like a church I went to when I first, started following Jesus, the way they would do giving was everyone had to go up and give. Okay. So everyone had to stand up and go give,
whether you had something to give or not.
Well, and if you didn't have nothing to give, you would just, you stick your hand inside of the thing and act like you dropped something in there. You just
put it in there and
you hit the jingle. You know what I mean? Like you hit the change,
like you try to drop that money out your hand.
Yeah, And so again, there you go, right? So they're using fear or guilt or shame. Like, man, if I get up and I don't have anything to give, then I'm going to be seen a certain way. If the pastor sees that I don't, you understand what I'm saying?
That's a really good one. And that also concerns me when it comes to communion, because, I always felt bad for those, before, when I was first coming up, I always felt bad for those that didn't get communion.
Yeah.
Like how did they feel being skipped over? Or, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so I think, when I would see churches do that, because I've seen other churches where it's not that type of situation.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But to see the ones and they pass the tray and then, you oh, no, you can't have none, or, you know what I mean? I can fear, guilt, shame, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so now, you feel like, okay, in order, so I'm not shamed next first Sunday or whenever they do it, I need to go do X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That is a great point, Lisa. It's a great point. And to be honest with you, that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to help people to show that you're not in the community of God. That is not the way to bring people into fellowship with Christ, is to make them feel like they're an outsider.
Right.
That's just, again, but I have a little bit of a different view on that, but that's exactly the truth, Lisa. That's the truth. That's what's happening there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It also, has to do with how certain things are taught, right? If there's an overemphasis on our sinfulness or our unworthiness, where it's not within a biblical worldview of our sinfulness, right? The scripture tells us that our hearts are wicked above all things, and I get that, right? But exacerbating that to the point where you're making people feel worthless, right? And utilizing that as a way to gain people's deeper commitment. Okay. Right. I remember we were in a prayer circle at this church, and there was a teen. And this particular environment, I would say had a strong doctrinal identity based on a certain theological belief. And this girl, she was a teenager. I mean, talking about like 15 or 16, and she was praying in the circle with us. And she just went on this tirade about herself, how I'm so nasty and I'm just filthy. And she just went on this tirade, like, 30 seconds, just, and I stopped her. Hold on. I opened my eyes and, I'm looking, I could see other people were just like, this is even people who were deep into that particular, but I was like, hold on, let's talk here. You know what I'm saying? Because it was, but again, she thought that this is what I'm supposed to believe about myself, because the more I believe this, the more accepted I am into this specific environment. This is exactly why she was doing it, right? And again, that's where high control environments kind of coerce people into believing certain things,
right?
Even if they're biblical.
Yeah,
it's the over exaggeration of these things, or a manipulation of those things to get people to trust the community even more so, right? Which ultimately leads to people being hurt in the end. So the next one is a persecution complex, right? So usually in high control environments, the church is always being persecuted. They don't necessarily do something wrong, right? So let me give you an example. So in a high control environment, if people leave the church, they left the church because not because the church was wrong, but because they're wrong. You know what I mean? Like, oh, God is purging us. He's purging us of people who just don't want to be. You see what I'm saying? Like it's they're always persecuted. They're always something that's against the church, right? So if somebody comes and they say, listen, I think we're paying too much attention to X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? They take that as, oh, this is not somebody who's criticizing. This is somebody who's hating on us. Oh, we must be doing something right because, because these people are talking. It's a persecution complex.
Yeah.
Right. So in these type of environments, they're never doing anything wrong. Anything that they do, it's a result of persecution. It's a result of somebody coming against them. It's never the church's fault. It's never what's happening there.
Yeah.
Any type of criticism it rolls down, like water off the back of a Tyrannosaurus. I'm just playing.
Rex?
I don't know. I'm just talking. But anyway, right? It's like water off the back, right? Like it just there's never anything that sticks. It's a persecution complex, right? It's always us versus them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so this is dangerous. So anytime I see that, when the church is just wrapped up in its own agenda, and they don't take any type of criticism, they don't take any type of, and I'm talking about constructive criticism especially from people who've been embedded within that community for a long time, like people whom are faithful and committed,
right? And
they can't take any sort of criticism. They see you as an enemy because you said something different or you see things different. That's a problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so that's number 7.
Okay.
You all right?
Yeah.
You doing all that moving.
No, that's just me. I just, I like to multitask. So staying in one place is a little difficult.
All right. So number 8, hyper spirituality.
Hyper spirituality.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the sense of, in one sense, it's everything is spiritual, right? There's just this over spiritualization of everything, right? Demons, you know what I mean? Like everything's a demon. So you need to be prayed for. Like you always need something, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so everything's over spiritual. If you have a problem or if something's happening, you're just like, man, I'm not feeling good about this decision. It's it's over spiritualized. Now we need to form a circle around you. We need to pray for you, right? It becomes, this over spiritualized thing that just makes you more attached to where you start to see like, okay, I need this community in order to thrive. I need these people in order to thrive, right? So there's this over, hyper spirituality. Then on the other side of that hyper spirituality is this, idea of always looking at sin. Everything's about sin, right? To the point where people are practicing sin management. They're not practicing spirituality. They're just managing their sin, right? Everything's about they're not following Jesus. They're just trying not to sin, right? So there's an over spirituality in terms of, focusing on sin. So everything's about sin, preaching about sin. Everything's about, that there's no conversation about growth. There's no real conversations about health in terms of spirituality. Everything's about managing sin. You're calling something out in somebody's life. And what it does is it just puts people in a place where they never feel like they're getting ahead. They never feel like they're moving, right? And they're always in need of the community, right? So there's just over spiritualization of things, focusing like on demons, and then also on the aspect of sin management, right? Like everything's about the sin you have in your life.
Yeah.
If something's going wrong with you, there's some sin that that hasn't been exposed, and so now you need to press in more, right?
That reminds me of cults. That just, you know what I mean? That sounds really cultic.
Yeah. It is. It is, definitely. And number 9 is spiritual covering. I kind of spoke about this a little bit, but and this happens a lot with singles. You know what I mean? Where there's a control, where like, the pastor's like, I'm your covering, right? It's like, you don't have a husband, and for some reason the elders of the church are now your spiritual covering. They're your guides, right? Or and this often results even with people where they feel like if I leave this community, then I'm not going to be blessed. You understand what I'm saying? So because we're your spiritual covering, you know what I mean? Yeah, I understand that you're hurt. I understand you have issues. I understand that you're feeling that. But if you leave here, you're not going to get a breakthrough. God's not going to do his work in your life. And so there's this overarching spiritual covering that comes with you being a part of this community. And again, it's just used to control you, right? It's used to keep you there, right? Regardless of what you're feeling, regardless of what it is, God is not releasing you. You need to stay here. God wouldn't tell you that. You need to allow us to work with you to get through this. But yeah, there's this real deep sense of spiritual covering.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The church is your covering. Your blessing is tied to your relationship with that community, right? And lastly, I just threw this one in here because this is something that's a little bit more related to modern day stuff. We're seeing this a lot more, especially in the mega church environment, along with all of this. Like if I experienced all of this in a church, or if I experienced some of these things in the church, I would, I'd probably exit. You know what I mean? I really think about my commitment with that community. Let me put it that way.
Right.
But this one, I think if somebody said this, I definitely would not be a part of that particular fellowship. I just would not. But that's, NDAs, non-disclosure agreements and or non-compete agreements. So, and we heard this.
What's the second one?
Non-compete. I'll explain them both.
Okay.
So a non-disclosure is, if like staff members leave a church, they have to sign an NDA, meaning they can't talk about what they experienced or they can't talk about anything related to the church. So you have to sign an NDA. That's just crazy.
They don't even make us sign an NDA in the health field.
No. They
I mean, I know there's a big thing called HIPAA, but still, like NDA,
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, but this is, kind of common. Like we heard it with, Bethel, or not Bethel, IHOP.
Oh, yes.
When certain staff members were let go, or Mars Hill.
Yeah.
They had to sign an NDA that they wouldn't speak about the things that happened. And that tells me everything I need to know.
Right.
That tells me everything I need to know.
Right.
Right. Like, okay, wait a minute now. If I have some experiences here with this church. Oh, we also heard it with Fellowship Monrovia when they, in order to get their severance package, they had to sign it. That's a problem. You know what I mean? That's a problem. And so the fact that you can't talk about your experience or talk about what you experienced at that church to protect that church, that's a problem to me. Now, a non-compete agreement is like, let's say you're going to a church. Mars Hill had this, but let's say you're going to a church and you're a church planter and you're going to go plant a church. A non-compete agreement is that you can't plant within a certain radius of that church, right? You can't, because you're competing now with that particular church.
Are you serious, Alan?
Yeah. This stuff happens.
Wow. But we're all supposed to be the church.
Listen,
we're all supposed to be the church, but you be the church over there and make sure your church don't cross over here.
Absolutely. You know what I mean? So, people are thinking that you're going to steal members or anything like that. So people have to sign non-compete agreements. And so if I was at a church,
that's why there shouldn't be memberships right there. That right there, I feel like should be why, because I don't belong to this, I don't belong to you.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think, all of this is a reason why I think membership is dangerous.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, but this is, definitely, if these two things were present in a community, if I found out that my church was making people sign NDAs or making other people sign non-competes, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like that's a clear sign that this is a high control environment, right? Along with the other things that we mentioned, right? But in saying that, like you said earlier, this is, another conversation that's much broader than what we can express here. I mean, we probably could do a podcast on
every single one of these,
yeah. In the future we might, do that, in some form or fashion. But we wanted to just kind of give a little bit of insight, right? I think that, again, besides all of the other stuff that's happening within church culture, the teaching aspect, people not teaching good doctrine, all of that type stuff, I just feel like as Christians, we're not really concerned with the culture of church. We're just not, we're not concerned with the culture, which is driving people away, which is, again, having people crash in their faith. And it's not because we don't have good doctrine. It's because it's not because we don't have good orthodoxy. It's because we have bad orthopraxy, right? We have good doctrine, but we have poor habits in living it. Or we're not living the scriptures, but we're teaching the scriptures. And unfortunately, this is the type of stuff that happens. And as I said before, it doesn't matter what type of community you're in. It doesn't matter. It could be a conservative community or a liberal community. It could be a deep theological community, and it could be a loose charismatic community. High control exists in every single church, every single worship community. And if we're not careful, or every single type of community.
I know what you meant.
Yeah. And if we're not careful, these are the things that end up leading to spiritual abuse and to church hurt. I guarantee you, IHOP KC violated every single one of these. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Mars Hill, I would guarantee every single one of them, right? These things are prevalent.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is, just reiterating one more time, is that it's not always obvious. Sometimes these things are very subtle, right? And they're hidden behind accountability, but it really just boils down to control.